It's been about 2 years since we've talked about who you are. And I feel like you're a different person now than you were 2 years ago. So let's talk about it, Cody.
Let's do it. I feel the same. It's been an interesting cycle the last 2 years.
Go on. Poureth your cup.
Well, let's see. 2 years ago when I first came, almost 2 years ago now, when I first came here, I still had 2 facilities. I was inspired and interested to be a part of the mission and a part of the thing that we were doing here, but I didn't really, I'd been working for the company for 2 months.
Right.
I didn't really know what I was signing up for 2 years ago. I had an idea, but we've gotten reps now in creating and building the thing.
How has that changed you as a person, though?
It's experience. I think it's difficult to separate the two for me, the personal and the professional identity.
Sure.
And it always has been. I get a lot of my self-esteem and my self-worth comes from my professional identity.
That sounds risky.
It is, but it's also empowering.
How so?
Because I feel like I have control over that. Like I very much feel, and I felt this way. This is why I ended up going and opening my own gym, right? Because I couldn't find the thing that I was looking for anywhere else. And I was the master of my fate, the captain of my ship.
Yep.
It felt similar coming to do this. Like I knew that there was going to be help and support and guidance. And one of the prerequisites of me doing this was to be allowed to do it in the way that I wanted to do it, and get the help when I wanted it.
So I want to talk about that for a little bit, because you've helped me a lot as a leader to learn how to, I don't even want to say provide guardrails, because it's the wrong way to describe it. It makes it seem as though you need like a safety net. You know what I mean? Let me think for a second here. You've helped me to better understand how to describe a vision and say, like, let's look in that direction without telling you, and I want you to see this when you go. I want you to see this when you go. I want you to do this when you get to there, and just allow you, like, just trust you with, we're going to have a really cool trip in that direction. Does that make sense? What has navigating that been like on your end?
I've been writing about this and thinking about this a lot lately, actually. Like the whole, no one's going to care about your business as much as you do.
I don't buy that.
I think it's bullshit. I think it's an awful excuse for immature leaders to stay, to keep themselves, or business owners to keep themselves in a position where they don't have to develop any leadership capability or skill.
Yeah. So go on. Why? Why do you say that?
Because it's, if I agree that no one's going to care about this as much as I do, then I also agree that I don't need to put in the time, the effort, the energy. Like, why would I invest in you to the fullest, to the maximum capacity that I have to invest in the success of another individual, if my underlying belief set is you're never going to care as much as I do? And people do that. And then they use that as a crutch and as an excuse for not learning how to speak to people the way that they need to be spoken to, how to develop them in the way that they need to be developed. That's the person who comes in and says, if only they would do it how I do it. That's one of the, you were talking, how does it feel being a part of that, and like the guardrails, so to speak? Like, I've always felt a part of the thing, and I've never felt like I was trying to do it in the way that somebody else wanted me to do it, because I felt like I had the trust to do it in the way, like I accepted the vision as the shared North Star. And then there was enough trust put in to where it's like, okay, now I trust that you're going to get us to that vision. And if I feel like, or we as the leadership team feel like you're actually going this way, you're going to end up in Mexico and not in Canada, we'll let you know. That's how I've felt about it the whole time. It's the level of trust that I've received from being a part of this organization, I'm eternally grateful for, because one of the scariest things for me stepping into working with someone else rather than working for myself was that, like, the loss of independence and autonomy.
Is there a pride of authorship that you were worried about losing?
5 years ago, yes. Now, no.
Okay, so what was it?
It's, I think I have the capacity to develop something really significant within, like, it's a internal belief. It's not a pride of authorship. Like, I need my name on this thing. It's just, I have this unreasonable belief in my ability to create something exceptional in this life. And this feels like that for me.
Has that always been there?
In smaller doses.
What changed? Well, you say in smaller doses. I don't know if you've ever seen those videos of people who are like, one piece of rice is $10,000. 100 pieces of rice is $1 million. This bedroom full of rice is Elon Musk's money. Have you ever seen those before?
No.
But I'm curious. You said in lesser doses. What is this? What is the magnitude with which you have it now that you didn't previously?
On an unreasonable scale.
Okay. So
Like,
where does that come from? Well, go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, it's that. It's now like everything that has happened up to this point has led to this point. Like it wasn't just like waking up 2 years ago and being like, I'm going to be a millionaire at some point. Like, I'm going to be a millionaire by 40. We're going to have 1,000 locations in 10 years. Like, that wasn't a part of the belief set 2 years ago. It was a hope and an aspiration.
Right.
But it wasn't like, I can see that shit more clearly now. And in smaller doses, like before that, the pivotal moment for me was when my father died. That was a cornerstone key log moment for me in my life to let me know that, look, this is short. It's finite. If his future is any indication of where you could end up, you're already halfway there at 26. He died at 59.
And you were 26.
Yes, I was 26 when I found him, and it fundamentally changed the way that I view the world. I mean, I have memento mori tattooed on my forearm now. Remember that you will die. Remember your death. His death was, he was a good guy and not a great man.
What's the difference?
A good guy does the best he can with what he has, and a great man decides that he can have more because he can be more and he can give more if he becomes more. My father decided at some point in time that his life was as good as it was going to get.
At what point, if at all, do you believe that that pursuit becomes toxic in itself?
More?
Yeah. Even in the sense of like personal development, more. At what point is it missing the forest for the trees?
When you lose context for why.
So what's the why to keep doing it in your position?
For me now, it's because the more that I am, the more that I can create and the more that I can become, the better this company does, the better the people in this company do, and the better our clients do.
That obviously sounds great for me. Why is that so important to you, though?
Because it feels fucking good to be part of something bigger than just me, myself on my island one of the reasons that I left Coldwater, Michigan, I was no longer inspired to be there. At first, I never thought I would end up back there. Like, I was the guy who, we gave senior speeches to our communications class, and mine started with, I hope you got enough of me in high school because you'll never see me at a reunion.
Okay.
And then, and then I end up back, not in the same town and close to the same town because of the decisions that I had made. You know, I got arrested 5 times by the time I was 24, all for alcohol or fighting related things. I decided to get back with a girl that we had no business being together, but she was from that town. So I moved back to that town. My father got sick, so I stayed in that town. I bought a business, which then kept me in that town. And all of the decisions that I had made through those early 20s, I was so focused on the outcome that I was trying to avoid that I ended up doing all of the things that created that for myself.
Right. Did you end up going to a reunion?
No, never have, never will.
Was that out of defiance, or was it just that that's not interesting to you?
It's not interesting to me. Like there's another piece about my hometown, and I imagine this is true for everybody's hometown, but I see the guys who just never mentally got out. Mm-hmm. Like they're still at 30 talking about that one high school football game.
Yeah.
That is so just full of despair. That's like, and that's how I felt partly about my father. He, made the decisions that kept him. He wanted to go back to school. He wanted to pursue a different career where he felt like he was more valued by the people that he worked for. And he just kept falling back into, this is not possible for me.
Was it you who was talking to me about people who say they do this for their kids?
Yeah, we were talking about that on a podcast.
We did talk about it on a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think we should rehash it because this is a good spot to talk about that. And when I'll get to it in a moment. When you talk about the town, not going back to the town, I think I left the town I grew up in, and it's a great town, right? Successful people come from there and losers come from there. Mm-hmm. It has your diversity in that respect.
Sure.
I would never go back to the places that I went to when I was in high school, college, and right after college, if for no other reason than anxiety over seeing people there who I saw there when I was in high school, college, and after college.
Because you don't want them to remember you that way?
No, not about me at all. My sadness for them. Like if I went back to this bar in Merrick called Patty Power, great name. Yeah. Patty's. If I went back to Patty Power and saw a few guys whose names I won't mention sitting there again, and I'm fairly confident if I went back to Patty Power, I would see a few guys whose names I won't mention still sitting there, still talking about high school basketball and the 3-on-3 tournament or the 2-on-2 tournament at our high school and just high school, right? Like I would be depressed for them, and it would take me a few days to shake that off because I was friends with these guys, and it's the old adage of like when people will tell you that you've changed. What are you, too good for this place now? It's like, yeah.
Look, there's all of these small towns, and even they're great. There are a lot of great people there. Like my hometown just wasn't great for me.
Sure. I don't think I think if your hometown is still great for you, you can either provide good rationale that actually makes sense. I have a friend who lives in the same town we grew up in. His kids will go to the same high school that we went to, and he's happy, successful, great marriage, great life. And then there are the people who stay for a different reason, right? Not because they loved it, because they can't figure out how to get out of it.
Yeah.
And there's that dichotomy there.
Yeah. There's certainly, in my opinion, more of group 2 than group 1.
For sure. I think maybe, I don't know how much of that is true, where I don't go that often to the town where I grew up, but I have friends now who moved to the town that I grew up in for the same reasons my parents moved there when I was a baby, right? Because they want the same life for their kids that my parents were able to afford me. So it's interesting to see it from the outside, living at the beach where we live. It's a very different lifestyle than there, and it's only 20 minutes away. We talked on the other podcast about the idea of when people say, what am I going to do? I got a family to feed, that there's this level of resentment that builds up there. I'm curious how that well, first of all, if you could rehash that for a second, then I'll ask my question.
Well, it's a projection, right? I'm doing this. I can't do this because of my kids. I can't do this because of their schedule. It's the significant other who I would love to change the way that I eat, but my husband keeps bringing garbage into the house. Right. So what you're saying is that you would love to become the person that you aspire to become, if only it wasn't for your damn kid's schedule or the fact that your husband sabotages you. That's what you're saying. So short time, that might be the way that you view the world right now. Play that out. over 10 years, 20 years, what sort of relationship are you creating with your husband, with your kids? If that's the story that you're telling yourself, you don't get to become the person that you want to become because of them. That sucks.
That does suck. So now that leads me to the direction I'm curious about for you. Isn't that a better way to start that question? How do you separate that from any constraint? So for example, right now, your role at Active Life is operations lead at the flagship and client services team member.
Client team lead.
It's a new position,
Yes.
so I'm learning. I just got good at the old one.
Yeah.
So congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well earned. There's a level of your life that is constrained by the way that we're able to pay you, by the amount of free time that we're able to give you. Like there is that like secondary limiter that as the owner of the company, I'm always trying to figure out how do we get rid of all of these limitations for people completely. Because the back of mind anxiety for me is there comes a day that everybody resents the pay they're making for the job they're doing in the location they're doing it.
I think for me, it's not a limiter, it's a lagging indicator.
Okay.
Like that is the fruit of the work. And maybe this comes from having my own business for 7 years. I'm imagining it does, right? When I was in the job before that, I had worked myself up to being a design engineer for a trailer manufacturer, where it was a $65,000 salary for 40 hours a week, sitting in front of a computer, designing RVs and travel trailers in 2D and 3D space. Benefits, 401k, insurance, PTO, all of the median income where I was from is 40,000 household.
Right.
So that's at 65 at 24, 25 for a guy who dropped out of college.
Living like a king.
Yeah. Like that's a pretty good living. And I could see how the next 20 years, 30 years played out because of the people who were working with me in that environment. They were 50 years old and just waiting for that vacation. They were getting the 1% to 2% cost of living raise increase every year, year over year. And they were just like counting, you could see them like almost this ticker over their head, counting the days down until they retired. I am not inspired by that or creating that. I'm inspired by what we're doing. I'm inspired by what I was doing for the people that I was doing it for. And quote, like I ran out of inspiration for that thing in that place. I didn't run out of inspiration to help people create a better life. That's a lateral move to what we're doing now. It's a life of freedom without compromise. I just didn't have the language for it then. That's what I wanted. And I believed, based on my experience, that CrossFit was the best way to do that.
Didn't we all at one point?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, I know. I'm agreeing.
Yeah, we became like I was a zealot for the thing, just like anybody who got involved in 2013, 2014. And your question was around how do I rationalize it in the short term, like the level of location, freedom, pay, all of those things. For me, again, they're lagging indicators, and I know, and I'm inspired, and I believe in the type of work that we're doing enough to know, not just believe, but to know that those things come. Like, and they come, by the way, I have influence over those.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because I agree with you. That's the only way I want it to be for anybody. But talk to the person right now who's in a job and explain to them how you have influence over those. Because they're like, no, you don't. It's a facade of security and it's a facade of influence.
Well, it's all just a facade of security, right? Whatever job you're in, you could wake up tomorrow and something happens and you don't have that. So like,
yeah, same for me.
Yeah. It's a facade of security no matter what organization you're in. There's so many companies right now, large scale companies going through 9, 10, 15, 20% layoffs. And those are not the people at the bottom that are getting laid off.
I listened to an episode of My First Million I don't know if you ever listened to that before, but they were talking about a guy named Ari Emanuel, who is a big time investor out in LA. He's in large part the character of Ari Gold was based off of this guy. He's owns the company that bought the UFC. I think the first time, not the new one. I think he just sold it. But anyway, they were talking about he was asked why he wasn't investing in tech companies in the last 3 years. And he's like, because the whole sector is worth, let's say, $360 billion. If I could bet on the sector, I would bet on the sector. I'd put the farm on the sector. But to pick a company is a bad idea. And he goes, and these are companies that are not going to go from $1 billion to $500,000 or to 700 million. They're going to go to zero. The employees aren't going to have a job. The founders are going to have to look for work again. It's going to be $1 billion valuation on a Monday and a zero valuation on a Tuesday. And that's the facade of safety that we're talking about.
Yeah. I'm reading Build, which is Tony Fadell, his book. It's the Unorthodox Guide to Making Things. I think that's how it ends. The Unorthodox Guide to Making Things. And he's the guy who did the first iPod, iPhone, the Nest thermostat.
Okay.
Right. And his first company, they created something that they were all like, it was a bunch of techies, right? And they were like, oh, it could do this and do this and do this, but they didn't know who their customer base was. So they were creating it for themselves and it flopped. It was a terrible, like it didn't do well at all because they hadn't identified. But that's the story of most startups, most businesses, most companies. I forget all of the statistics around it, right? But if you make it to 5 years, you're in the top 20%. I
think it's 10%.
If you make it to, well, and then it fractions again every year after that, right? Only 10% survive every year thereafter. So I went through some of that with my companies. And this is one of the reasons that I really do believe everyone who feels called to and inspired, especially when you're young, and by young, I mean in your 20s, it could be later, but certainly in your 20s, take a chance on yourself to have your own company. Because even if it doesn't work out exactly, and it won't, the way that you imagined it's going to, the lessons that you get to derive from that experience are so valuable, namely that you have the capacity to figure shit out. I think so many people go through life never really betting on themselves and never taking a chance on themselves. So they start to believe that they're not the type of person who could. And that's my father. He's 40, 50 years old, and he's lost the ability because I've created a life full of decisions, and now I'm weighing the scales, right, of all of these things that I have versus any of the potential that I could have.
The sunken cost fallacy.
Yeah, exactly.
I've spent the last 20 years building this career. In 5 years, my pension kicks in. And then 5 years comes, your pension does kick in, but it's only at 60%. And if you stuck around, like all of that.
You don't have that in your 20s.
You're right. We went through that in our house. Kim was not enjoying teaching anymore. She had a long commute. The parents, she didn't identify with the kids or the parents anymore. She grew up in a very mixed neighborhood, and she taught in one of those neighborhoods in Long Island for a while. And she loved the experience, but had the difficult part of calling parents who didn't give a shit. Then she gets a job in this other district where the pay is double, literally double. So for people who don't know, on Long Island, she made in excess of $120,000 a year to teach, plus health insurance and all that good stuff. And she wasn't having a good time. And we bought our house because we wanted to live down the street from where our kids would go to school. We wanted a yard. She envisioned herself walking our kids to school, picking them up from all of that. She wasn't able to do any of it. And she was dealing with, like, her mental health wasn't awesome. It was all just tied up in how many more years until she could collect her pension? What would it cost to replace her health insurance? All of that kind of stuff. And then one day we were like, fuck it. I was terrified, by the way, because I did not have a plan. I had to call my buddy Ryan, who's my roommate in chiropractic school. And I was like, I just told her to quit She asked if I was serious, and I said yes. And then I told her I had to go somewhere to the grocery store to pick something up. And I really just had to call you because I don't know how I'm going to make the money that replace the money that she was bringing in. And he was like, you'll figure it out. Thanks, man.
It's a good vote of confidence.
It was a good vote of confidence. He's a good friend, and he was right. But that is a tantalizing carrot to chase.
Yeah. The potential future of, well, I'll do it and enjoy it when I get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of those things that now I still think about, not her school. Like now I'm like, what are we not enjoying right now that we're going to look back and say, we should have enjoyed that in those years. Like one of those things is that I think about often is the kitschy stuff that Kim likes to do that I can't stand. Like go to Disney World, go to an indoor water park. I'm like, no, I'll do it with you if you really want, but is that really what you want? Wouldn't you rather go to like Iceland or some cool mountain somewhere, some really cool lake? That's the stuff that right now we're battling with. And so we have paralysis by analysis. We do nothing.
Yeah. I'm much more in the do it, like the take the action camp. Because maybe, you know what, just alternate years. Like 1 year or one summer we go to Disney, the next one or the fall we go to Iceland. 1 year
just spend a ton of money on a terrible experience. A ton of money that we don't comfortably have on an experience that I don't want, that I've heard is only complete after you've had to put the kids in the hotel room, close the door, and tell them, figure it out.
It's type 2 fun.
Yeah.
It's fun after the fact.
Expensive type 2 fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it's look, it's an experience. Yeah. I like theme parks.
Well, you can take them.
Nah, I mean, I don't like theme parks with your family.
How do you know you've never been? That could be a story you're telling yourself.
You're right. You're right. It might be
that story.
Yep.
So what advice would you give to people in a similar position to the one you found yourself in 2 years ago, and to people who are in a position that you're in now? I think they're two very different positions. I'll split the hair. The position from 2 years ago is a guy who is about to be thrust into a role that he doesn't understand, that we don't understand, that forces a big move, like moving your life across the country, and has a very unclear future. That's person one. Let's start there, and then we'll go to person two.
Well, I don't know that I'm the person to give anyone advice on stuff. I'll share my experience, and then if there's lessons to be derived from that.
It's a great Cody answer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm happy to do that. Look, I had gotten to the point where 2 years ago, and to put myself back there, I had gotten to the point where I'd done a lot of the work leading up to that, the self-work, the inner work, I had gone through my Unlifted stuff. I had done some training camp stuff. Like I had actually started to work on myself.
Oh, so for people who don't know what Unlifted is or what training camp is.
They're personal development certifications and courses, essentially, right? So Enlifted does story work. They teach you about conflict architect language, some of the stuff we've talked about before. They teach you how to identify your inner evil mentor kind of person, right? So this would be in different circles, you would call this the ego, or the shadow, rather, the inner critic, right? So this coming into training camp was a lot of like they focus on what they call mother learning and father learning. Mother learning is how you treat yourself. Father learning is how you see yourself in the world around you.
Okay.
Right. So everyone has these 5 personas inside of themselves. There's the shadow, which is the deep, dark things. You know, the Japanese talk about this. Everyone has 3 masks. The one that you show the world, the one that you show those close to you, and the one you only show to yourself. The shadow is the one you only show to yourself. It's the deep, dark stuff that you don't talk about at parties.
Right? You haven't been to parties with me in a while.
Right. This is the stuff that you're not bringing up. The inner critic is exactly what it sounds like. It's the little voice in the back of your head that tells you about how you can't do it, you're not good enough, and all the stuff. The ego, which I have a healthy relationship with ego. I think ego is a good thing. The ego is the part of yourself that compares you to others. It can compare you. It's the comparison game.
I get it.
Right. And then there's the inner child, which is the 4-year-old, the 5-year-old, the 6-year-old version of yourself that is just love, enjoy, and just wants to be loved. Then there's the heart, and the heart is your innermost desires. I had spent a lot of time in the building up a life in the years previous to that, listening to things other than my heart and my inner child. So those personal development pieces help me to start to chip away the things. And we've had conversations about this on the podcast before. What do you do when you realize you built yourself up with the wrong things? You tear it down and you start over. Right. And that's luckily, I don't think it's an innate thing. It's a skill. Luckily, that's a skill that I've been able to develop enough over the years where I'm comfortable knocking the Legos down and rebuilding. And that's what that transition 2 years ago felt like. It felt like I had finally made the decision through all of the things that came up to that to knock the Legos down, and I was ready to rebuild them. I didn't know exactly what I was creating and building, but I like to build things. So I leaned into that, and I saw an opportunity to continue to build things for people that I was inspired to be around and to work with. You know, Dan, Mary, you, Ken. I was inspired by those type of people. And I always default to the Les Brown. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? You spend time with losers, you spend time with 5 losers, you're going to be the 6th one. You spend time with 5 millionaires, you're going to be the 5th one. I saw it as an opportunity to change my orbit, to change the quality of the type of person that I was spending time with. So I said yes. And the lesson I would have to derive from that is I imagine that we all have had experiences and we're all in positions where we have that already. Like, it's scary. There's an opportunity. There's a door that's open to you, and it's scary and you're uncertain about what lives on the other side of that. So you're going through the cost benefit analysis and you're trying to rationalize why you should not make the decision because of all the fear. The encouragement would be to rationalize all of, like, what if the good shit? Rationalize all of the potential that is created by this, what you could do. Because look, if you fail, you've already failed so many times at so many things, and you're fucking fine. You made it here, right? So give yourself the opportunity to just take a chance. That's 2 years ago. That's the 2 years that got me to that point 2 years ago to say yes to doing this.
That was helpful. Why is it, do you think, my microphone's dropping?
Yeah, saggy mic.
Man, this is what happens when you let your daughter into the podcast studio and you record with her. I'm going to ask you this question. I'm going to get up and tighten it really hard. A lot of people go through personal development stuff and remain unchanged. Why do you think you went through it and took it so strongly to heart and made the changes that you made? You know, like, I don't think I need to expand on that.
No.
Everyone knows the person who did a bout of mushrooms once and is like, I'm new. Okay.
There's a couple of factors for that come up. You know, a lot of people, once they do those things, there's this, it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? You have this false sense of, I've gotten there, because it happens real fast and it feels good to go through. This is why people get addicted to it, just like they get addicted to anything else. It feels good to go through that. It feels good to be vulnerable, to let it all, to get it off of your chest. That's what a lot of personal development is looking at the parts of yourself accurately, the dark parts, the broken parts, and being like, these are okay. It's okay because they're a part of me. People who get stuck in the personal development loop make one of 2 errors, in my opinion. One, they fall into the trap of this feeling good means that I need to do more of this, right? They get addicted to it in the way you get addicted to cigarettes, alcohol, or sex, because it feels good. or they never actually go through the necessary phase of implementation. They go from one course to the next course to the next course, and they're just chasing the personal development dragon. They're never giving themselves the time to integrate and implement the stuff that they've been working on. That it's the person who, it's me, who goes to their first CrossFit class. 6 months later is coaching. 6 months later owns the business. I hadn't gone through enough implementation to figure out if I was a good coach, a terrible coach, or a reasonable coach. I started a bunch of side businesses when I was little. I mowed lawn. I sold bootleg Livestrong bands. I had done all of, we ripped DVDs in college.
Sure.
Sold DVDs from pirated movies. I had created all these little side hustles, but I had never actually run a business. So I just jumped in through the kind of false sense and the false ego, right? And it was a benefit at times, but it also caused me a lot of pain in the beginning of it. You know, I made $11,000 the first 6 months that I owned the business. That's what I took home.
That wasn't enough?
It was enough for ramen, which it felt like I ate for the first 6 months.
Right. And that's after you had a job making $65,000 a year. Yeah. You left that job for this.
Yes. Yeah. Which I had that job for 2 years while my father was still alive. Right. And it was the, I will quit that when this makes enough. When this becomes a real business, then I'll quit my air quote real job. The fact is that it would never become what it needed to become if I wasn't full focus into it.
Yeah. Another episode of that same podcast I was talking about earlier, the My First Million. Actually, same episode. They were talking about the things that makes this guy, Ari Emanuel, Dana White, people like that so successful is a religious level of all in on what they do.
Love that.
Have you listened to the new podcast that Joe Rogan did with Abigail Schreier? It's about her new book called Bad Therapy.
Oh, yeah, I did. Actually, okay. I did. I listened to it on the way to Carlisle last week.
So a lot of for people who don't know, she wrote a book about the excessive use, in her opinion, of therapy for children and even adults. And I'm
mostly for children.
Yeah. And I'm not going to expand on it any more than that because I shouldn't. One of the things that she brought up that I found really interesting about therapy in general is like, we all know someone who's been in therapy for years and you're like, I don't think it's working.
Right.
But the reason why they keep going when it's researched seems to be they get to go and talk about themselves for an hour and their problems. Like it's cathartic to just talk about yourself. It's everyone's favorite subject. Do you think a lot of personal development is similar to that?
Sure. Well, that's the problem that people run into, the first problem that I described.
The people who loop.
Yeah. Because it feels good. Like what you're describing, it's bad therapy, right? It's what is it? Psychotherapy versus cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy, they typically say, this is going to take us this long. This is what we're going to do. This is when we know we're going to be done. Psychotherapy is the one that is the never ending. You just do this for the rest of your life.
Right. She described that as like once the kid can pee in a toilet, they're potty trained. You started therapy because the kid wasn't potty trained. Once they can use the potty, therapy's done. We solved our problem. That kid's not an annuity. They don't keep paying every year.
Right. There's a piece of that, right, where as much as no one wants to look themselves in the eyes and say it, they feel good being the victim.
Yeah. They feel well. So I think when I'm acting weakly, I enjoy expressing all of the things that are frustrating me about even what I'm failing to do. in no way am I feeling like a victim, waiting for the world to change. None of that. But I have to be careful to move from this is what I'm struggling with to, and this is what I'm going to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to get stuck in, this is what I'm struggling with. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how many times you've experienced that. It's intoxicating to stay there.
That's the loop.
Yeah. Well, we just built out a 10-step framework that I couldn't even recite to people because I don't remember it yet. But then I'm excited to be able to go through one day on a podcast about the ebbs and flows of personal development and self-exploration and empowerment and leadership. And what I think is really interesting about what will come of that as we explore it more is the idea that we're never really out of it. It's kind of like gravity. You know, like we can jump pretty high, but we do come back down. Mm-hmm. We have to decide to jump again. When, like, you think we just experience that until we die?
That's the law of rhythm. This is something that I've become attuned to over the last couple of months, thanks to my mentor, Ryan. The law of rhythm. Everything in the universe expands and contracts. Everything ebbs and flows. Look at the tide. It goes in and out. Look at your breath. Mm-hmm. You expand and you contract. Your heart expands. It once it stops, you die. Mm-hmm. Ebbs and flows are a universal law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction.
Doesn't that insinuate, though, that if we're really successful,
yes, it does,
we're gonna have an awful back end on it?
Yeah, it does. It means that the pendulum is going to swing back. And remember, nothing is good or bad, only our thinking makes it so. So it's not that we create a massive amount of success and then we have a massive failure, because yes, that is how it works. The problem and where we get irritated within ourselves and of ourselves and with ourselves is when we attach to the success and we attach to the failure versus observing, right? The whole idea behind this meditative practice, right, and mindfulness is to become the observer. It's not that I am angry, sad, happy, successful. It is that I am the sky, and all of these things are clouds, planes, birds that exist within the sky, but I am not that thing. I am the entire thing that is experiencing those things. So if I can then climb the pendulum and realize that I'm the observer, I don't have to, negation acknowledged, attach to the success or the failure. That
sounds way easier to do when it has nothing to do with meeting payroll.
Sure.
Like fortunately, we've, knock on wood, made payroll every time it's been payroll time. But there were some months in the history of this company where I've been like, I think we're going to make it. And you don't see that on Instagram because it's really hard to talk about that while you're in it. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean hard in terms of like I wouldn't have been willing to. I mean, like, how do I describe this and help everybody still feel like they have some security? You know what I mean? But how do you go to a place of I am the experience when it's like, yeah, and money has to be in the account?
Yeah, look, everyone has a plan till they get punched in the mouth.
Sure. But isn't this whole thing about like I am the punch in the mouth?
You are the thing, you're the being, you're the existence who got punched in the mouth, right? Now you get to decide, okay, what am I going to do with this information? Because what you're describing is input. What am I going to do with the information? I'm struggling. You've had the experiences where, and so have I, owning my own businesses, right? I don't know what we're going to do about payroll. I don't know if we're going to, you can decide to be there and stay there, mm-hmm. or you can decide, okay, this is a part of the process. This is a part of the game. What things in this can I control? What can I do about this? Mm-hmm. And then we go out and we find the next client. Mm-hmm. We save where we can save. Mm-hmm. We influence the outcome as much as we possibly can to create and help that pendulum continue to swing.
Sure.
And it's still going to. So I don't know how you go, oh man, this is going to be really tough. This is going to be difficult outside of taking action. Like I don't think it's helpful to sit there and dwell on that. I've never had success with it.
I'm understanding you better now. Because what I was understanding before was in some respects, like, yeah, that happened.
Yeah, okay. So you're thinking you're just passive, and
Yeah.
you're just like,
Yeah.
well, there's a part of that. Like, you have to accept the things that you can control, and what is it? God, give me the grace to accept the things that I can, and the humility to understand the things that I can't.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. Like, there are things that are going to happen within your life, within the business, that you have absolutely a very small percentage of control over. Like, we could wake up and at both of the businesses, all of our clients could decide that they no longer want to be clients. What can we control?
Mm-hmm.
We can control the way that we respond and we react to it. And it sounds easy to say, and I realize it's much harder to do. I've gone through iterations and contractions and expansions within this business, let alone the other businesses. Yeah. But your outcome is determined by your effort, your input, the things that you decide to do when you're at the most challenged. It's not when the bank account is good and when you're flush.
Right.
It's the decisions that you make when the pendulum is swinging in the other direction. Mm-hmm. And it never lasts forever. The good seasons don't last. Like, look, summer is followed by fall, which is followed by winter, which is followed by spring. Where yesterday was a beautiful day. It was like 60 degrees. I went out to the boardwalk. Thousands of people.
Yep.
Out on the boardwalk and the beach yesterday. I went running 3 months ago at 8:00 at night in the rain, and there were 2 people on the boardwalk. It's cyclical. Everything expands and contracts, and the more that we can realize that, I think the better off that we are.
Well, let's go back there for a second, because there's something really interesting there. You were on the boardwalk in the rain. Mm-hmm. There were 2 people there. You were on the boardwalk yesterday. It was 61 degrees outside and beautiful. There were thousands of people there. Who do we need to be on the boardwalk in both of those instances? Because I only want to be around the people who were there both times. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'll explain it in case people don't. It's uninspiring to me. It's actually a negative value for someone to wait for everything to be right to do anything. So when you talk about the boardwalk in that way, it's both a metaphor and it's a reality. Like, if you're a person who goes running, what does the weather have to do with it? You go running, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we do. I know it's raining out. And we go running. Someone who would say, nah, not when it's not nice out. I'm like, well, that really sucks. So what does it take to be the person who is on the boardwalk in both of the days?
I don't know, man.
It's an interesting question, though.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thought. I don't want to give myself so much credit for the question.
There's, we can go back to the tactical things we can try, be, do, have. You can make the decision to cultivate the identity of the type of person who does X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. And if we go back to how I believe we're naturally oriented, right? Whether we're a planner, an action taker, an idea person, or something else. I orient towards action, mm-hmm. right? So I may not have all of we go back to Colby A, quick mm-hmm. start, right? I might not have all of the information, but if I'm in, I'm in. Mm-hmm. We had a client who just enrolled who was the same way. She had walked in on Monday last week, set her consultation at her ask for Monday of this week, and in 90 minutes decided to enroll. Some people are oriented towards action, and you need all of those things on your team, by the way. You need the relationship builder. You need the action taker, you need the planner, and you need the idea person. Mm-hmm. None of those are better than the other. They're all equally valuable on a team. And what I've found is to be the type of person, you just lean into that. Like, we all know where we're naturally oriented or the areas that we want to improve, right? This goes back to the ideation and the loop people get stuck in. They never go through the implementation and the action phase. Maybe you need less ideas. Maybe you need less talking about it right now. Maybe you need less planning, and you need to just fucking go. You need to try, because even the feedback loop from that, right? The person who has to have the perfect plan is going to spend 3 months developing the plan. They're going to spend 3 months implementing and taking action on it. Now, the person who doesn't need the perfect plan might spend a month in ideation. Then they're going to test in month 2. They're going to get feedback. They're going to pivot by month 3. They're going to course correct again by month 4, right? And the distance that they have traveled, even though it looked like this, is greater than the person who spent 3 months planning and then 3 months implementing. Because even let's assume it was perfect, which it wasn't, right? They still made tweaks, pivots, and changes. They only have 3 months of implementation. I have 5.
Right.
I have 2 additional months of lessons, insights that I've derived from the experience. So this might be the answer to your question. Do it. Like, even if you're going to do it wrong, do it, because we don't regret the things that we do. We regret the things that we do not do.
There's a few things I've done that I regret. All right, so let's go to the second version. By the way, we are doing a freaky amount of the same things with our legs today.
Mirroring.
Yeah. This might be my final question. What's different about the advice you don't give advice? I'm just going to ask the question the same way to you now.
I mean, you never step in the same river twice, for you are not the same man and it is not the same river.
Sure.
It's just been more experience. That's the thing that's changed. Getting back to, as well, having a personal mentor has been huge for me. So this is one piece I will give advice. If you don't have someone who is teaching you something, and not just professionally, I'm talking personally, you are inhibiting your own potential for growth. Because I have seen the most rapid expansion through my experience, and contraction precedes expansion, when I was involved in personal mentorship.
Well, as long as I've known you, with very rare exception, you've always been.
No, like not having somebody directly that I was working with. Professionally, yes, not personally.
Okay, so that's been about the last year then.
Yeah. Yeah, even the year before that, it was not as much, and I needed it, right? It's the you need the contraction time. You need to have somebody who gets it if you're going down this mentor route. Somebody who understands the ebbs and flows, the law of rhythm. You need implementation time. That's the contraction time. That's when you're focused on yourself. That's when you're doing like inner work. That's when you're allowing some things to die off so that new things can be built. And then you get the expansion phase. And I feel like even for us at the flagship, we went through a phase of contraction. We've gone through multiple phases of expansion and contraction if we look back at it already. Yeah. Which is very interesting. We're certainly in a phase of expansion.
It's the do that you were talking about. We started and we were like, we think this is how it's going to work here with these people in this location at this price point, with this model, with this communication, like all of the, and it was like, oh, right thing, wrong communication, wrong thing, just up and down and up and down and up and down.
And we've decided, over the last 6 months to really step into, we've got them personal mentors, the team personal mentors, a personal mentor. We've decided to step into being the professional, to step into that identity rather than what are all the things that we need to do. And that's a piece of what has changed there. They've made a huge credit to the team. They've made the decisions about who they wanted to be and how they wanted to operate. They stopped asking, what do I need to do?
It is very cool.
That's been the difference over the last 2 years. There's been the acceptance of and the recognition of that law of rhythm. That's been huge for me recently.
You think we're going to go through the same? They obviously won't be the exact same, but do you think we're going to have the same or similar struggles in all the locations that we open after this one?
We won't have the same or similar. We'll have different. And we'll be able to derive the lessons that we've taken from this first round and will shorten the time between the two. I don't think it's going to be the same at all.
Right.
That's insanity.
I agree. I'm just thinking about how much we've poured into our people, into ourselves. Like, I've had to get mentorship to go through this. You've gotten mentorship to go through this, personally and professionally. Our team has gotten mentorship to go through this. It has been a whale to do as well as you guys are doing it. I'm extremely proud of it. And I'm just thinking about doing that over and over and over. Like, are all of our people going to need all of that development, do you think?
Yeah. And maybe.
In their own way, at their own time.
Uh-huh. It depends where they're starting at, too. I think one of the huge benefits that we'll have in future locations is the pool of people who are inspired and interested to work there.
Right.
Right. Who will have, because our product keeps getting better with ALP, they will have gotten a significant amount of this, and it won't be brand new to them. Mm-hmm. And then the leaders in those facilities will have gotten a significant amount of this. It won't be new to them.
That's the thing for me that's so exciting about opening more locations, and especially partnering with great people to do it, is the people who are created as a result, or who are frankly revealed as a result. It forces such a leveling up of all of the elements of us. And I'm excited for the people who are going to be doing this next, because they think, no matter what they think, there's no way to anticipate the magnitude of all of the things that are coming their way. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like the decisions that naturally most people make are around the business. Is this the business that I want to operate within? And what we keep bringing back to them is no, is this the person you want to be? If it is, the rest of it functions around that. It's a mind fuck, man.
The decisions become easier.
They do. It's just, I never anticipated all of this when we started.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to open a business. We're going to be successful. I knew we'd have some ebbs and flows. I knew that. But I never thought there would be such an emotional relationship that I have as someone who's not working in it with it. And what's interesting is how parallel it is, frankly, for me with my marriage. Because I'm like, I have to give that person who I love the freedom to decide who she wants to be. And I can choose to be inspired by that or not. The business, like, the more, if I tried to micromanage and like, don't you want to do this? Don't you want to do that? Doesn't this seem like a good idea? It would just go to hell. And it's the same thing. And it ends up being a better version than I would have created on a slower timeline than I would have liked it to have gotten there.
That's interesting for you, especially because I know you've been working on like the control piece.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you draw the parallel between the two.
I made a post last week about how my marriage has improved my ability to lead and be in business. The control thing for me is really about what it really comes down to is wanting to make sure that you in particular have similar ambition to what I have for what that place can be, that the staff who are working in there are up to the task and interested and inspired by the task, that everybody feels the same ebb that I feel when it doesn't do well. It's like I get this haunting sound of like a boat making a terrible noise, like the Titanic creaking. You know what I mean? It's like, yes. And I'm like, everyone heard that, right? Everybody heard that sound? And then the feeling of the engines pushing it forward is like, oh, yes. Let's go stand on the front of this thing and fucking feel the wind. That's, I want everyone to be feeling the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the control that I battle with.
Well, I imagine, we go back to the experience piece, because you've had experiences with other divisions in the company, right? Where they got better by you not being as involved in them.
Yeah. This.
So how'd you do that the first time then?
Oh, the first time. I'm trying to think exactly when the first time.
Maybe this is a good next episode.
Well, let's at least lead into it.
Yeah.
I realized it wasn't the first time. It was the real time.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. First time that mattered. Is that what you're describing?
The first time that lasted.
Okay.
I realized I was stressed. The collective we were stressed. And I had been in charge of handling all of that the entire time. From before the stress, in the stress, to the not coming out of the stress. And what I realized was the people who were most capable of removing the stress were the people I was most limiting from doing it, because I was afraid of how they would remove the stress. But it reaches this point when you have to look at when I had to look at myself in the proverbial mirror and say, you have had a chance and you haven't done it. You're either going to afford these people the opportunity to and trust them, or there's no reason for you to believe this ever ends.
Some people will step up in that moment too, and some people will step out.
I felt like stepping up was stepping out.
Really?
For me?
No, I mean, not just you, but I mean the people that you're empowering.
Oh, I'm saying me stepping up
Yep.
was me being higher minded and saying, you don't have to be the person who does all of these
Yes.
things. In fact, you shouldn't be the person who does all of these things. Get out of the way. That was my high mind.
Yeah.
And then, we created an environment for people to now that everything they asked for was on their plate. And some made it and some didn't.
Yep. I had a smaller experience with this when I owned my facilities, and I ended up getting Bell's palsy.
I don't mean to laugh at you. I'm just glad that didn't happen for me.
Yeah. It was quick. It was that's such a weird thing to happen, by the way, to get. This side of my face was just paralyzed. I had to tape my fucking eye shut every night to go to sleep.
It's brutal.
And they're like, it could last 6 weeks. It could be 6 years. We don't know. That's the best you get with that. Like, it's a virus, it's inflammation, it's stress. All those things get together and they freeze a nerve.
It's a cocktail.
I said, cool. So I went into my facility like the day after, right? And I had a meeting with my two coaches. And I was like, look, I can't keep doing all this. Like, I gave myself fucking Bell's palsy. and one of them stepped up and he became my partner in business number 2. One of them stepped out. He was like, he put in his letter, he put in his 2 weeks notice, like a week after that. You create the environment and you give people the opportunity, and some of them, they're going to step up. Some of them are not. You want the people who step up.
Well, it sounds like we need to do a podcast about that experience. And we flip the question answer.
Yeah.
Turn pro. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Active Life podcast. Please remember, give us a hand, rate it, review it wherever you listen to shows. We are on a mission to humanize the healthcare industry by professionalizing the fitness industry to empower the individual to live a life unlimited by the way that their body looks, feels, or performs. If you are inspired by that mission and want to jump on the wagon, find us anywhere. Active Life Professional on Instagram, Active Life RX on Instagram. Come to me personally at Dr. Sean Pastuch. We want to welcome you onto the train. We want you to be a part of the mission. We want to offer you the opportunity to pursue this right alongside us. We're inspired by your effort, and we hope to help you in your journey. Turn pro.